Do you know that there was a moment in history when the entire world stood just minutes away from nuclear war? One wrong move, one bad decision, and millions of people could have died. This is the true story of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the most dangerous 13 days in human history. The year was October 1962, and the key players were the United States, the Soviet Union, and Cuba. At this time, the world was divided into two powerful enemies, the United States and the Soviet Union, also known as the USSR. This period was called the Cold War. There was no direct fighting, but a constant atmosphere of tension, fear, and threats loomed over everyone. So, how did this crisis begin? In 1962, the Soviet Union secretly sent nuclear missiles to Cuba, a small island just 90 miles from the coast of the United States. Why would they do this? First, the USSR wanted to protect its ally, Cuba, from a potential US invasion. Second, and more importantly, they wanted to place their nuclear weapons right on America's doorstep. These missiles were so close that they could reach major US cities like Washington, D.C. or New York in just a matter of minutes. For the first time, millions of Americans felt directly threatened by nuclear annihilation. The shocking discovery came on October 14, 1962. American spy planes, flying high above the island, took photos of the ground below. What they captured on film shocked everyone in the White House. The images clearly showed nuclear missile bases under construction in the Cuban jungle. When US President John F. Kennedy saw these images, the gravity of the situation hit him hard. He knew that if these missiles became active and ready to launch, the world as they knew it could end. What followed were 13 days of intense, paralyzing fear. For the next 13 days, the entire world held its breath. The US military was placed on its highest alert level, just one step short of all-out war. Nuclear weapons were prepared for launch. American warships formed a ring around Cuba, creating a naval blockade to stop any more Soviet ships from arriving. Meanwhile, Soviet ships carrying more military supplies were sailing directly towards this blockade. Tensions were at an all-time high. At any moment, one mistake, one misunderstanding, could have ignited World War III. Most people around the world didn't know the full details at the time, but we now know that nuclear war was closer than ever before in human history. One moment during this crisis was especially terrifying. A Soviet submarine, armed with a nuclear torpedo, was lurking near Cuba. It was soon surrounded by US destroyers, which were dropping small depth charges to signal the sub to surface. Deep underwater, the submarine commanders couldn't communicate with Moscow. They were isolated and under immense pressure. Believing that war had already started on the surface, 2 of the 3 senior officers on board voted to launch their nuclear torpedo. A single launch would have instantly destroyed a US aircraft carrier and triggered a full-scale nuclear retaliation from the United States. They were just 1 vote away from unleashing Armageddon. But the 3rd officer, a man named Vasily Arkhipov, refused to agree. He calmly argued against the launch and insisted they wait for orders. Because of his courage and clear thinking in that moment, the world was saved. So, how was total disaster avoided? While the military posturing was happening in the open, secret negotiations were taking place behind the scenes. Desperate back-channel talks between the Kennedy and Khrushchev administrations were the world's last hope. Finally, they reached a breakthrough. The Soviet Union publicly agreed to dismantle the bases and remove the missiles from Cuba. In return, the United States publicly promised not to invade Cuba. But there was also a secret part of the deal. The US quietly agreed to remove its own nuclear missiles from Turkey, which were aimed at the Soviet Union. On October 28, 1962, the crisis officially ended. The world collectively sighed in relief as it stepped back from the very edge of destruction. This moment changed history forever. It was the closest humanity has ever come to global nuclear extinction. It proved that one calm decision, like Vasily Arkhipov's, could save millions of lives. The crisis forced leaders on both sides to truly understand how terrifyingly dangerous their nuclear arsenals were. As a direct result, new communication systems, like the famous Red Telephone Hotline, were created between Washington and Moscow to prevent future misunderstandings from spiraling out of control. This crisis fundamentally changed how nations handle conflict, ushering in an era of more careful diplomacy. Why does this story still matter so much today? Because nuclear weapons still exist. Global tensions are still a part of our world. And history, especially the story of the Cuban Missile Crisis, shows us just how fragile peace really is. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the fate of the entire world can depend on one person having the courage to just say no. And this was just one moment when the world almost ended. History is full of hidden stories, dangerous decisions, and unbelievable events that schools never teach us. If you want to hear more real stories like this, stories where humanity stood on the edge of disaster, subscribe to this channel because the past is far more intense than you can imagine. Thanks for watching.